Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Unacademy, India's largest online learning portal for the preparation of competitive exams. My name is Neelam, and I'm going to be your facilitator and guide for CAT and other management exams. In today's session, I'm going to have discussion on CAT 18 passage, and with that, I will also pick up some words and phrases which appear in the passage, as well as today, I'm also going to have a discussion on some phrases of sociology. So let's start with today's session. Before that, let me give you a brief introduction of myself. I possess around 12 years of experience of test preparation industry and have trained students of CAT, GRA, GMAT, IELTS and TOEFL. My expertise have been in English and verbal reasoning. I have also designed assessment papers of English and reasoning for different government bodies as well as professional bodies of different states. I also served as an examiner of English for an international organization. Recently, I have authored a comprehensive book of English for the preparation of competitive exams. The book is written in both Hindi and English, and the book is available on Amazon. This video is brought to you by Unacademy, a dedicated channel for CAT preparation, that is just CAT. Now let me tell you how you can be part of this and start your preparation for different exams. You have to go in the Play Store and download Unacademy Learning app. There are two versions of app, one for educator, one for learners. You have to download Learning app. After filling in all the details, you will be shown three categories of courses, plus free courses and special classes. After downloading this app, you will have access to all the classes which are available under free courses and special classes. If you want to attend classes for CAT, you will have to subscribe to Plus course. Now, what are the benefits of subscribing the Plus course of Unacademy? The benefits are 30 hours of live session every day. So as per your availability and as per your time, you can choose the time of your classes. As well as you can also choose the educator of your preference and choice. The classes are delivered by 40 plus top educators of India who have wealth of experience of mentoring and guiding students for CAT and management exams. These educators possess extensive experience of taking exam continuously for so many years. They have in-depth understanding of all these competitive exams in management category. The courses which are delivered by these educators are well structured, well designed by those people who have experience of curriculum and module design. These courses have the fine balance of conceptual clarity and testing and exercises so that you are well prepared for the exam that you are targeting. Every month you see a new course being launched on Unacademy Plus portal to cater to the needs of a specific exam. Take example of ZAT. So ZAT has decision making, a specific component which does not appear in any other exam. So a course will be launched on Plus platform which will cater to the decision making or other elements which are there in SNAP and IIFT which are peculiarly related to these exams only. So you will see a course cater to specific demands of IIFT and SNAP. Alright, so every new month you see a specific course, specialized course designed for a specific exam. All these facilities, all these features you can avail with single subscription of Plus. Now let's understand how different subscription models have been designed to suit your plan of the preparation for this exam. So if you are planning this year CAT and those exams that are happening in December and January, you can take for 1 month. You can take 1 month subscription for crash course that is going to cover all the syllabus which is going to appear in the exams which are going to happen in December and January. If you are appearing or if you are planning to take CAT next year, you can go for yearly subscription. Whichever model of subscription you choose, if you type the reference code Neelam, you will be able to avail 10% further discount, right? So after discount, this is going to be your fee for CAT. 1 month, it is going to come down to 3,150. For 12 months, that is 1 year subscription, it is going to come down to 15,750. This fee structure is best in the industry and very pocket friendly. All right. So that's all about Unacademy. Now let's start with today's session. That is one passage of CAT 18, and with that some phrases and words. As I have been giving you the sources of these passages, the passage that I have picked up for today's discussion appeared in the blog of London School of Economics. So in 2018, the blog was written by Jerry J. Z. Muller. He is a professor of history at Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. And he wrote about how the title of this whole article was Against Metrics, how measuring performance by numbers backfires. So from the title itself, you can imagine what this article must have. You can anticipate the content of this whole article by reading the title itself. It is self-explanatory that author is against the metric system. That was the passage about. It was a very long article which appeared in the blog of LSE, London School of Economics. So the shortened version of that article has been picked up by the examiner of CAT to give you as the passage of the exam. All right. So if you want, you can always read this whole article so that you see what parts have been picked up and what parts have been left out by the examiner to suit to the needs of an aptitude exam. With that, you possibly will have understanding of what parts or what kind of text are important for question framing. All right. So have a look, read the passage, read this article completely, and this is also something that you should start referring to. So if you want to alter between your regular text or regular reading that you have been reading, you can also read the blogs of famous universities like Harvard, Oxford, and LSE. Alright? Now let's start with passage. I'll give you 30 seconds for each paragraph. The passage has 4 passages, so I'll give you 30 seconds for each. Then I'll explain it to you, and then we will approach the question. Right? So that has been the way we have been doing passages. So let's start. Alright. So 30 seconds, start. All right. Okay. So the passage starts. As more and more companies, government agencies, educational institutions, and philanthropic organizations are today in the grip of a new phenomenon, metric fixation, obsession with metric. Metric is nothing but data, facts. So a lot of organizations are now fixated on the idea of data. The key components of metric fixation are the belief that it is possible and desirable to replace professional judgment, the judgment that you have acquired through personal experience and talent, with numerical indicators of comparative performance based upon standardized data. So ये बोल रहा है कि ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा कंपनियां अब ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा डेटा पे रिलाई करने लगी हैं। ये डेटा किस चीज़ को रिप्लेस कर रहा है? प्रोफेशनल जजमेंट। प्रोफेशनल जजमेंट जो किसी के पास कब आता है? जब वो उसके पास पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस होता है और टैलेंट होता है। तो प्रोफेशनल जजमेंट को रिप्लेस कौन कर रहा है? डेटा। और लॉट ऑफ कंपनीज आर रिलाइंग, सभी ये कंपनीज जो है किस चीज़ पे भरोसा कर रही हैं? डेटा पे, नंबर्स पे, और इवैल्यूएटिंग देयर एम्प्लॉयज परफॉर्मेंस। अपने एम्प्लॉयज की परफॉर्मेंस को इवैल्यूएट करने के लिए डेटा पे रिलाई कर रही हैं। The numerical indicators of comparative performance based upon standardized data. And that the best way to motivate people within these organizations is by attaching rewards and penalties to their major performance. और सबसे सही तरीका एम्प्लॉयज को मोटिवेट करने का है कि उनके रिवॉर्ड्स एंड पेनल्टीज दोनों को ही किस चीज़ पे अटैच किया जाए? इस मेजर परफॉर्मेंस पे, इस डेटा पे। यानी आपने कितनी सेल्स की, कितने लोग आपने ऑनबोर्डिंग किए, कितने कस्टमर्स को आपने सेटिस्फाई किया, सो डेटा, right? So the data is going to be attached to rewards and penalty, right? So this whole paragraph states what metric system is and how more and more companies are relying on this system to evaluate their employees' performance, right? So in one line, that is what is the paraphrase of this entire paragraph. Let's go ahead, 30 seconds for next paragraph. Read it thoroughly. All right. Fine. So this was a long paragraph. I gave you enough time to read it. I hope you understood the whole content. Now let me read it out for you. The rewards can be monetary in the form of pay for performance, say for reputation or reputational. Now in the form of college ranking, hospital ranking, surgical report cards and so on, right? So इस तरह से employees को reward किया जा सकता है different तरीकों से. But now this was the whole idea which I boldfaced, and if you understood it, you possibly could understand what author wanted to say. But the most dramatic negative effect of metric fixation is its propensity to incentivize gaming. Now, सबसे ज़्यादा जो इसका नेगेटिव इफेक्ट है कि इट इंसेंटिवाइज गेमिंग. सो गेमिंग को ये इंसेंटिवाइज करता है, यानी ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा प्रीमियम जो है वो गेमिंग पे है. हाउ? दैट इज एनकरेजिंग प्रोफेशनल्स टू मैक्सिमाइज द मेट्रिक्स in ways that are at odds with the larger purpose of the organizations. So क्योंकि employees का reward depend करता है metrics पे, numbers पे, data पे, तो वो उनको maximize करने की कोशिश करेंगे. और उसको जब maximize करने की जो कोशिश करेंगे, उस effort में जो organization का जो bigger goal है, जो larger goal है, वो compromise हो जाएगा. If now author gives example, if rate of major crimes in a district becomes the metric according to which police officers are promoted, then some officers will respond by simply not recording crimes or downgrading them from major offences to misdemeanor. Now that's just an example. Author gave the idea that if all employees want to earn more and more rewards, they would like to increase their metrics, the data, the number. Now he gives the example of a police officer. कि अगर एक पुलिस ऑफिसर की परफॉर्मेंस इस चीज़ पे डिपेंड करती है कि कितने क्राइम हो रहे हैं, द नंबर ऑफ क्राइम इन द एरिया दैट ही इज डिप्लॉयड इनटू, वो क्या करने की कोशिश करेगा? वो उस नंबर को कम करने की कोशिश करेगा. या तो वो रजिस्टर ही नहीं करेगा ताकि उसका नंबर कम दिखे. सेकेंड, वो क्या करेगा? जो एक बहुत ही मेजर क्राइम है या जो सीरियस क्राइम है जिसका मैग्नीट्यूड हाई है, वो उसको एज ए मिसडिमीनर, छोटी मोटी गलती दिखाने की कोशिश करेगा ताकि उसका खुद का रिकॉर्ड ना खराब हो, उसका मेट्रिक ना खराब हो. ऑलराइट, सो एग्जाम्पल is just in the service of the idea. The idea is this is going to defeat the larger purpose of an organization. So एक पुलिस डिपार्टमेंट का, एक लॉ डिपार्टमेंट का एक लार्जर पर्पस है क्राइम को रोकना, क्राइम के नंबर को रोकना नहीं. सो ये पुलिस ऑफिसर क्योंकि उसका परफॉर्मेंस किस पे डिपेंड है, नंबर्स पे, ये पूरे एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के लार्जर पर्पस को डिफीट कर रहा है. ऑलराइट, सो इफ यू लीव रीडिंग दिस एग्जाम्पल and if you understood the idea clearly, you can always believe that this idea is going to substantiate the example. So that's how you can minimize your reading time. Another example that author has given. Or take the case of a surgeon. When the metrics of success and failure are made public, affecting their reputation and income, तो उनके कितने केसेस एक सर्जन की सक्सेसफुल है और एक कितने केसेस उनके फेलियर हैं, इसको जब आप पब्लिक कर देते हैं, सबको पता चलता है कि सर्जन के कितने केसेस फेल हुए. सो उसकी रेपुटेशन अफेक्ट होगी, उसका इनकम लेवल भी अफेक्ट होगी, बिकॉज अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल मे नॉट वांट टू गेट सर्जरी डन बाय दैट सर्जन. Now some surgeons will improve their metric score by refusing to operate on patients with more complex problems. Now अपने metrics को सुधारने के लिए surgeons क्या करेंगे, जो complex problems के साथ patient आएंगे उनका ऑपरेशन करेंगे ही नहीं, क्योंकि उनके फेल होने के चांसेस ज़्यादा होंगे, क्योंकि वो अपना मैट्रिक्स खराब नहीं करना चाहते, इस वजह से उन पेशेंट्स को नहीं ऑपरेट करेंगे. Who suffers? Author puts a question and then he answers, the patient who don't get operated upon. Alright, because आपने उसका performance किस पे बेस कर दिया, metrics पे. By these two examples of surgeon and a police officer, author wants to say that these two professionals are taking the course of unfair means to increase their metrics, right? So author gives example to say it is actually defeating the whole organization's purpose, right? Okay, let's go ahead and third paragraph. Fine. Now, when reward is tied to measured performance data, metric fixation invites just this sort of gaming. But metric fixation also leads to a variety of more subtle unintended negative consequences, right? So author states here, now the previous slide talked about some negative consequences, but this is not limited to that. It also has some subtle, कुछ और बारीक unintended negative effects भी हैं. These include goal displacement. Goal displacement का मतलब है जो आपका goal है that is displaced. Now let's try to understand what it actually says, which comes in many varieties. When performance is judged by a few measures and the stakes are high for the employees, the stakes are high. Keeping up one's job, getting a pay rise, or raising the stock price at the time that stock options are vested. These सारे stakes high हैं. People focus on satisfying those measures, few measures on which they are measured, a few metrics on which they are measured, often at the expense of other, more important organizational goals that are not measured, right? So, if my performance is measured on 1, 2, and 3 things, so I'll focus only on these 3 things because they are going to decide my ranking or they are going to decide my reward. So, other performance indicators which are equally important as a professional for me to discharge my duties well are not taken into account because they are not tied with any kind of reward or penalty. So I'm not going to take care of these performance indicators, though they are equally important. So my goal is displaced as an employee. The best known example is teaching to the test. a widespread phenomenon that has distorted primary and secondary education in the United States since the adoption of the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. Now, what happened in a teaching to test? This whole phrase is also self-evidently clear that it means a teacher is teaching just to clear a specific test. The teacher is not imparting wide-ranging skills to a student to be prepared for his life, to do well in his life. The teacher is educating the child only to be ready to clear a specific test. After clearing the test, he may not have those life skills to survive well in his life. So here the goal is displaced, right? Because teachers' evaluation is based only on the student's performance in a specific test. If students perform very well in a specific test, as a teacher, I'll be evaluated or graded higher. Alright, so if that is the metric system on which my performance is measured, मैं सिर्फ इसी चीज़ का ध्यान दूंगी कि मेरे बच्चे जिनको मैं पढ़ा रही हूँ वो सिर्फ उस टेस्ट में परफॉर्म करें, उनको वाइड रेंजिंग एबिलिटीज़ या वाइड रेंजिंग स्किल्स पे मैं फोकस नहीं करूँगी. The goal is displaced. As a teacher, my goal is to educate them well or giving them holistic development or holistic education. But because of this metric system, the goal is displaced. One more example to support the idea that goal is displaced. All right? Last paragraph, quickly. All right. Now, short-termism is another negative. So, author talks about 3 negative points of metric evaluation. Measured performance encourages what the US sociologist Robert in 36 called the imperious immediacy of interest, where the actor's paramount concern, the person who is doing an action, actor's paramount concern with the foreseen immediate consequences excludes consideration of further or other consequences. Now here, एक जो यूएस के सोशियोलॉजिस्ट ने जो बोला था, ऑथर उसको साइट कर रहा है अपने पॉइंट को सपोर्ट करने के लिए कि उसने ये कहा था कि इम्पीरियस इमीडिएसी ऑफ इंटरेस्ट, जब आप इमीडिएट इंटरेस्ट देखते हैं तो आप लॉन्ग टर्म इंटरेस्ट को भूल जाते हैं. You focus only on immediacy of your interest, immediate interest which can be fulfilled, and in doing so you easily forget what lies ahead in future, right? In short, advancing short-term goals at the expense of long-term consideration. This problem is endemic to publicly traded corporations that sacrifice long-term research and development, right? So वो ये बोल रहा है कि ये वाली प्रॉब्लम शॉर्ट टर्म कंसिडरेशन, ये प्रॉब्लम पब्लिकली ट्रेडेड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में एंडेमिक है, मतलब उससे बहुत कॉमनली होती है ये. Which sacrifice long-term development of the organization as well as their staff to the perceived imperatives of the quarterly report. हर क्वार्टर में जो रिपोर्ट तैयार करनी होती है उसमें डेटा होना होता है, उसमें नंबर्स दिखाने होते हैं, इस वजह से वो लॉन्ग टर्म बेनिफिट को भूल जाते हैं क्योंकि उनको हर क्वार्टर में एक रिपोर्ट दिखानी होती है, right? So they sacrifice their long term because this quarterly report that they have to represent or they have to present is, obscuring their vision for the long term. All right. So this is what author says. Author is highly critical of metric system, and he listed all possible critical points that he wanted to explain in order to disapprove the whole idea and the concept of metric system. All right, that is what is the whole idea of this passage. I hope we are clear with that. Now let's start addressing the questions. So the question 1 says, all of the following can be a possible feature of the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. I hope you remember this act was cited in paragraph 3, where author talked about another negative consequence of this metric system, where he talked about goal displacement, right? Where he said teacher is teaching only for test. Now let's read out the options. School funding and sanctions are tied to yearly improvement shown on the test. He did not talk about school funding, right? He did not say that school funding and sanctions are related to the performance of these students. Teacher is teaching only to clear the test, and hence the purpose of education is defeated. That's what he said. B. Standardized test score can be critical in determining a student's educational future, right? Is that what he meant when he cited No Child Left Behind Act of 2001? And if it is critical, then possibly author wouldn't have cited as the negative consequences. All right, they are not preparing them for the larger, for those abilities which are going to help them in life. Only myopic vision of clearing a specific test. So B is also not the answer. Assessment is dependent on the teacher's subjective evaluation of students' class participation, right? Now, subjective is when a teacher takes care of how qualitatively student performed, rather than specifically basing the performance on some data or some numbers. So here teacher is taking care of the quality of the students' participation, right? Now this is what author has not stated as the consequence of Child Left Behind Act of No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. Had this also been included in the assessment, he wouldn't have explained it as a negative consequence. This is not happening, and this is the demerit, right? So C is actually the answer. This is not happening in America. Everything is based on the metric system, even in education, and C is not happening. Subjective means teacher is going to assess, taking care of students' performance in the class, looking at the students' performance in the class by her own experience and by her own talent. She will make an assessment, or he will make an assessment of students' performance, not only on the basis of some data or number. So subjective is qualitative. C is the answer because that is not mentioned. Now D, the focus is more on test taking skills than on higher order thinking and problem solving skills. So that's very clearly given. All right. Question number 2. What main point does the author want to convey through the examples of the police officer and the surgeon? So we understood that paragraph very clearly. He said that the larger organizational purpose is defeated when these two officers, these two professionals take undue advantage of the whole system and try to control the metric, right? A. Some professions are likely to be significantly influenced by the design of performance measurement system. Influence is again negative, positive, both. Now this option does not state it very clearly whether these professionals are negatively influenced or positively influenced, right? So A is not actually capturing the whole essence of this. B. The metrics linked reward may encourage unethical behavior among some professionals. Now this should be the answer, because a surgeon who should say yes to the patient who has come to get the operation done to him without taking care of whether his operation is going to be successful or not, he should treat the patient. Just because he is taking the consideration of his own metric, his own performance, he's saying no to the patient. So that is an unethical behavior. So is the behavior of a police officer who is downgrading the magnitude of crime from a serious crime to a misdemeanor, just because he doesn't want to affect his metric, right? So yes, B should be the answer. C, critical public roles should not be evaluated on metrics based performance measure. Now this is the underlying idea. Yeah, so this was a very close option, right? So critical roles should not be evaluated on metrics-based performance measures, because he gave example of two very important people who play very important role in the society, a police officer and a surgeon. So you may feel like choosing C as your answer, but did he say those roles which are not very important, their performance can be based on metric evaluation system? No, right? So he was not selective that for some professionals metric system is okay, for some professionals it cannot be okay because they play a very critical role in society, right? So he is not selective, he is equally critical, he is squarely critical to this whole system as the performance measurement. All right, so that is why C is not the answer. A lot of students got confused between B and C, and a lot of them felt, whenever I have discussion of this passage, a lot of students feel C should be the underlying idea. Yes, it's the underlying idea, but the example he gave to support the idea that larger organization is defeated, right? So answer is B. Why not D? The actions of police officers and surgeons have a significant impact on society. Yes, they do have, but he did not give these two examples to prove this point. He wanted to prove that metric system can have this deleterious effect on some professionals because they can actually manipulate their metrics by some undue ways, right? So that is what is the answer. Answer is B. Question number 3. Which of the following is not a consequence of the metric fixation phenomenon mentioned in the passage? Which is not the consequence, right? So we talked about mainly 3 consequences. Now let's read the options. A, finding a way to show better result without actually improving performance, right? So here is not a consequence. That means this has to be the consequence. So finding a way to show better result without actually improving performance. So here this is the consequence, right? Because the police officer, by downgrading and not reporting the cases which are happening in his area, what is he doing? Is he controlling the crime in his area? No. But by manipulating his metric, he is showing that crime is controlled in his area. So this can happen, right? So the police example actually supports this idea. B, improving cooperation among employees leading to increased organizational effectiveness in the long run. Now this has not been mentioned anywhere in the passage, right? Let's understand what C says. Deviating from organizationally important objectives to measurable, yes, yet less important objectives. Yes. Remember goal displacement? So there the author said there are 2 to 3 few parameters on which employees are being evaluated, right? And yet other performance indicators that are equally important for their task are ignored, are overlooked because they are not measured on these performance indicators. 1, 2, 3. How many, let's say, how many customers they deal with, how many sales figure they booked, and how many products they sold. So these are 3 important performance measures on which they are evaluated, right? So they are focusing only on these 3 things. Now, how punctual they are, how cooperative they are, how innovative they are, or maybe how how responsive they are to the customers. All these things which are equally important are not evaluated. So they are going to ignore these things. So it was also stated. D, short-term orientation induced by frequent measurement of performance. Yes, last paragraph stated short-term because it is induced by short-term performance. Every quarter you have to present your sales report, sales data. So you are focusing only on short-term interest, short-term gains. all these are the consequences except B. So B is your answer. Alright. So improving cooperation among employees leading to increased organization effectiveness in the long run. None of the part of the passage explain that. Fine. Question number 4. Of the following, which would have added the least depth to the author's argument? Now this is the STEM question which has been devised by CAT recently in 2018 and in 2019 both. The question was framed this way, right? So this is asking you to find out in a statement which is not going to support author, right? So add the least depth to author's argument. So depth is nothing but value, right? So if a statement is there, that is going to add value to the author's argument. Now, which option will not add value to the author's argument? That's what you have to find out. So don't get perplexed just because a question is framed that way, right? So take a pause, try to understand what it says. Now, this got repeated in 2019 as well, right? So in one of the slots in 2020, don't get baffled if this question also comes in one of the passages. It is asking you, please look at least or most, right? So if it says would have added the most depth, that means which option would have supported the most, and which would have added the least depth, that means least support. Now the assessment of the pros and cons of a professional judgment-based evaluation system. Now you are not evaluating on the basis of professional judgment. There are metrics which are taking care of their performance. Alright, so here the assessment of pros and cons of a professional judgment, you are judging as per professional criteria, as per professional standard, right? So you will see the pros and you will possibly understand that what benefits are there if you are assessing your employee's performance with some professional judgment criteria, right? So that way, yes, it is going to add some value to the author's argument, right? Because he says metric system fails miserably, right? So possibly the assessment of pros and cons of a professional judgment-based system will add more value to the author's argument. Second, an analysis of the reasons why metric fixation is becoming popular despite its drawbacks, right? So since the passage is wholly focused on metric system, then why it's becoming popular, though it serves very limited purposes, though it has a lot of drawbacks, why it's becoming so much popular? Because a lot of organizations are fixating on that. In the very first paragraph, we were told all kinds of organizations are fixated on metric-based system, right? So having this kind of study would also add some merit to the author's argument. A comparative case study of metrics and non-metrics based evaluation and its impact on the main goals of an organization. The author says metric-based system sacrifices the larger purpose of the organization. Now, if there is a comparative study where metric-based system and non-metric-based system evaluation was compared and the resultant outcome was discussed, that will also add some value to the author's argument. D. More real-life illustrations of the consequences of employees and professionals gaining metric-based performance measurement system. He has given enough examples. He gave a lot of details. He gave example of police officer, he gave example of surgeon. In order to prove his point of goal displacement, he gave the example of teaching to the test. And in last, for short term, he gave the example of a sociologist. So he gave enough details to expound on his idea. He did not hang you there only with the idea. He gave enough details, he progressed his idea further to prove his point, to drive his message loud and clear. Alright, so this is not going to add any value. More real life illustration will not add any value. Alright, so D is the answer. Now this was based, this was again an inference based question, right? So which require you to evaluate the author's reasoning here. Alright, last question. What is the main idea that the author is trying to highlight in the passage? Okay. First paragraph, second paragraph very clearly talked about the main idea. Fixation The word that he has chosen is always negative, it's obsession. Performance measurement needs to be precise, cost-effective, to be useful for evaluating organizational performance. Now, had this been the main idea, cost-effective, that means this is possibly not cost-effective. He did not talk about the cost, right? He did not say how much this whole metric-based system is costing organizations. And neither did it say that it is not precise or it is inaccurate or imprecise. Second, evaluating performance by using measurable performance metric may misguide organizational goal achievement. Now, this seems to be the idea which author has actually focused on in entire passage. He says the larger organizational goals are compromised if you consider only some specific data, right? Let's hold it. See, long-term organizational goals should not be ignored for short-term measures of organizational success. Now, this is also an idea, but is that the main idea? This idea was captured in the last paragraph, right? So last paragraph talked that another outcome or consequence of metric-based evaluation system is that companies start looking at short-term goal because they have to give quarterly report. So this was an idea, but it was not the main idea. One more thing, the main idea is about metric system. This whole option is leaving out that important part of the passage, the metric system and the failure of metric system in evaluating the employees correctly. So long C is also not the answer. And why C is not the answer? I told you. D. All kinds of organizations are now relying on metric to measure performance and to give rewards and punishment. Is that the main idea? No, that's not the main idea. He started whole paragraph, whole passage with this, that all kinds of organizations are relying more and more, they are fixating on this, but that's not the main idea. So don't get confused just because it appeared in the first paragraph, because you have been told that main idea is there in the first paragraph or the last paragraph, but main idea can also be progressed in the second paragraph, right? So main idea can also be in the end of first paragraph. So main idea is nothing but author's opinion on the issue. So his opinion is metric system does not work. Answer is B. Alright? Fine. So we are done with the passage. I hope we are clear with the answers. Now let's move on and talk about some words which appear in the passage. And with that, I'll also have compiled some phrases of sociology that I'm going to talk about today. Now, teaching to the test, as I explained this term while discussing the passage as well, but let's try to widen our understanding of this term. It's a colloquial term which is widely used in America, where teachers start focusing on the students' performance in ACT or SAT. Now, these are standardized tests which are conducted in America for the admissions to colleges, right? So a student who wants to study in a college has to clear one of these exams. So there is heavy reliance on students' performance in these tests, and teachers start preparing students for excelling in these tests, and they forget the whole purpose of educating these kids. These kids are focusing only on 2 to 3 skills which are evaluated through these standardized tests, forgetting the life skills, forgetting higher order thinking skills, forgetting critical thinking skills, forgetting problem solving skills, those skills which are very, very important for them to develop as a mature adult educated individual, right? So this is compromising the whole and larger purpose of education. So teaching to the test is a pejorative term, that you are teaching only to clear a test. You are not teaching for educating a mind or for enlightening someone's, someone. Rather, you are just teaching in a very confined, narrow-minded way to clear them, to make them clear a specific test. So teaching to the test, it's a derogatory phrase for teaching specifically for a test. Propensity, that also appeared in the passage. Propensity is your inclination to do something, right? So organizations have the propensity to do something, so that way the word was used. So please understand what propensity means. It basically means your tendency to do something, your inclination to do something. So a natural desire or need that makes you tend to behave in a particular way. So inclination to do something. He showed a propensity for violence. So propensity to do something, propensity for something. Both the prepositions are correct. Her propensity for accepting a challenge. So she has the tendency to accept challenges. She has a propensity to exaggerate. She has a propensity to blow something out of proportion. All right. Misdemeanor. So the police officer downgrades the crime from serious crime to misdemeanor. So misdemeanor is an action that is bad or unacceptable, but is not very serious. So mischief maker, wrongdoer, these words are used by police officers to define those kind of activities which are usually done by young criminals, right? Who are not very serious in nature, or the crime which are not very serious in nature. So misdemeanor, mischief maker, or wrongdoer. So youthful misdemeanors, a crime that is considered to be less serious than a felony, right? So a felony is a serious crime. Felony is again a very serious crime. Imperious. So expecting people to obey you and treating them as if they are not as important as you. So when you have imperious attitude, you are condescending towards others. You are also haughty and you feel that others are beneath you. Imperious comes from imperial. So imperialistic powers which had imperious attitude because they felt they should colonize small countries. So from that you can understand imperious, imperialistic. The professor was as imperious as ever, as haughty as ever. She put out an imperious hand to stop him, so dominating him. An imperious gesture, an imperious voice, an imperious command. So that is dominating. Imperative, last paragraph, this came. They are ignoring the long-term goals, long-term research and development of their organization as well as their employees because of the imperatives of quarterly report. So imperative is something which is very important. It is very imperative for you to look at your percentile in CAT. It's imperative for you to reduce your wrong attempts in CAT. A thing that is very important and needs immediate attention or action. A factor that makes something necessary. That is imperative. The economic imperative of quality education for all. The biological imperatives that guide male and female behavior. So those things which are important and guide. Alright. So imperative adjective, imperative noun both mean something which is important, cannot be ignored. Now these are the terms that I have picked up from sociology. As I said, we covered some phrases from literature. We also covered some phrases from economics. Today I have taken a few phrases from sociology. Alright. Now, bourgeois is the class, it's a French word, which is also widely used in English, which has gained a lot of currency in English and now it is used in English to define middle class, to define a class which is not rich, right? Common class. Belonging to a characteristic of the middle class, typically with reference to its perceived materialistic values or conventional attitudes. So when you call a class bourgeois, that means the class is solely focused on materialistic things, money and other possessions, materialistic possessions. So when you call bourgeois class, that means the class which is solely focused on materialistic things, and the common class. A rich, bourgeois family. Relating to a characteristic of the social middle class, right? So marked by a concern for material interest and respectability and a tendency towards mediocrity. So usually bourgeois is not intellectually advanced, or bourgeois is not a class which is very, very influential or affluent or intellectually advanced, right? So they are common, they have common interest, they have common in their attitude and their behavior, And there is nothing very exceptional about bourgeois class, all right? And that is why they fall into that category. So common people, common class, usually the class which is focused only on their own materialistic possessions, all right? And which are also characterized by mediocrity. The conform is to follow, right? So when you download an academy learning app, you have to conform to the rules and regulations which have been laid down for educators and for learners, right? So conform is to follow, conform is to abide by. Now when you become conformist, right? So when this word is used to define a person's characteristic, that means the person follows certain principles blindly. He's very traditional and he's conservative in his outlook. So that is what is conformist. So conformist has a kind of that kind of connotation which signals that person is not open to change. He is not open to new outlook or new perspective. Rather, he conforms something rigidly. So according to Maton's theory of goals and means, those who accept cultural goals and the institutionalized means of achieving them. Institutionalized, that means what has been given them by the institution of family, by the institution of society, by the institution of marriage. So these different social institutions. So what has been passed on to them, they will follow them blindly instead of changing them, instead of seeing, assessing them, whether these institutions are serving any purpose or not, they will conform it, they will follow it, right? So that is what is conformist. The opposite is non-conformist, right? So a person who pioneers a thought, a person who introduces a new thought and idea and who innovates certain things. So that is non-conformist. And a person who defies institutions or rules, that is also non-conformist. So conformist, non-conformist, both for those people. I mean, I hope you understand both are opposites, opposite words. So conformist for a person who follows, and non-conformist is a person who defies, who is defiant in his attitude. Now I've taken two terms from sociology. One is ethnocentrism. Now ethnocentrism is the term which is used by anthropologists to describe the opinion that one's own way of life is natural or correct. So if I believe that the way life is led in my society, in my community, or maybe in my family, or in my country at large, is the perfect way of living life, or it's the perfect way to lead a human life. So when I have this narrow vision about life and experiences, I become anthropocentric. We all are anthropocentric in some or the other way, right? Some would simply call it cultural ignorance, because since we are not exposed to other cultures, since we have not been traveling a lot, or we have been confined to our spaces a lot, we may not have the understanding of other cultures, right? We may not have the broadened outlook which takes care of multiculturalism. And hence, whenever something new comes to us, we start seeing it as something unacceptable. We start treating it as something which is wrong, right? So ethnocentrism means that one may see his or own culture as the correct way of living. For those who have not experienced other cultures in depth, can be said to be ethnocentric if they feel that their lives are the most natural way of living. Some cultures may be similar or overlap in idea or concepts. However, some people are in a sense shocked to experience differences they may encounter with individuals culturally different than themselves. Now, if I travel to a different country, an African country or South American country, where I see people eating insects or people eating snakes, right? So since I have never been exposed to this kind of culture, I may find it extremely shocking and unacceptable. Whereas this has been a custom in their culture for centuries. They find it completely acceptable. Or if I may go to a tribal area in my own country and I find a very peculiar tradition there, a tradition which is not followed in modern India or which is not followed in modern societies, which are progressive or perceived to be progressive. So I may find those traditions and culture unacceptable, or maybe I may find them appalling, which cannot be harmonized with um, modern traditions. So this is what is ethnocentrism, because I am trying to understand their culture from my perspective of my own culture. Right? I'm dictated by the vision of my own culture. I'm not trying to understand their culture from their perspectives. So I'm centric on my own culture. I'm centered on my own culture. And with that, I'm finding all these new elements of their culture shocking and unacceptable. So ethnocentrism is you are centered, you're focused only on your culture, and hence you find other culture or new elements of other cultures shocking and unacceptable. Alright? So ethnocentrism, centered on your own culture, focused on your own culture. Now culture relativism. Now, the attitude that in order to understand the traits of another culture, one must view them within the context of that culture. The same ethnocentrism, which ethnocentrism is devoid of, should be there in cultural relativism. So, as a student of anthropology, or as a student of psychology, or as a person who wants to understand multiculturalism, or um, other cultures of other societies, I should understand their culture with their perspective. I should not be colored or dictated by the perception of my own culture. So culture relativism refers to not judging a culture to our own standards of what is right or wrong. So there are ethos of our culture which has taught us what is right and what is wrong, and it has been perpetuated by our upbringing and the kind of conditioning which we have been given by our family and society. So it has a rigid structure in our mind, it has been fossilized in our mind. So, what is wrong in our culture is not perennially wrong, is not universally wrong, right? Something which is wrong in our culture may be perfectly acceptable in other cultures. So, when I see these customs happening in their culture, you may find it shocking that in some cultures, old people, when they cross the age of 80, they are killed by the young people of their society, right? So that may be deplorable for us. It may give us a goosebump that how those people kill the members of their own society, but it happens. So they have their own rationale for having this kind of custom because they live in a with very limited resources, and they believe that those people who are not productive, they should be killed, and even their body is going to serve some purposes in their society, right? So that way you start seeing this custom from their perspective, and then you may not find it very shocking because you will try to understand from their perspective. So that is what is cultural relativism. All right, so I'll just read out. Instead, we should try to understand cultural practice of other groups in its own cultural context. For example, instead of thinking fried crickets are disgusting, those small insects, one should instead ask, why do some cultures eat fried insects? Why they have this kind of customs? You may learn, right? So when you try to understand why, you will understand the reason behind this practice. Instead of finding it shocking, instead of judging them, you may be inquisitive and possibly investigate further why this practice exists. You may learn that fried crickets or grasshoppers are full of protein in Mexico. It is famous regional cuisine and have been eaten for thousands of years as a healthy food source, right? So this is how, when you try to inquire further, you will find out that this is actually perpetuated. This has actually been perpetuating in that society for years, for generation. So they do not find it unacceptable or wrong. So that is what is cultural relativism. You try to understand from their perspective. So that you don't have any cultural shock. So these terms were related to sociology. Now you are only 2 days away your exam. This is Friday and Saturday. You have 1 day between your exam, right? I hope you all are ready for giving your best shot this year. And though you should leave no stone unturned in excelling in this exam and giving your best performance in the exam, but you also have other options. You also have non-CAT exams coming up in December and January. Till February you will have exams. So don't feel nervous. Don't hinge all your hopes, don't pin all your hopes on this exam only. It's just an exam, all right? So if you perform well, nothing better than that. But in any case, if you falter or if it does not go as well as you hoped or you wished, you still have other options, right? So with that positive note, I would like to end today's session, and I'll make a very brief video tomorrow about what to do on the exam day in examination hall, right? So stay tuned on this channel for more videos for CAT preparation this year as well as for next year. Thank you very much and all the best.